Good evening and welcome to Domination and Submission Radio. My name is Mike Mackay and I am your host with the most DS, BDSM, kink, and fetish talk on Blog Talk Radio, or anywhere as far as I'm concerned. Our show tonight is about your local BDSM Munch Group. If you have something to say about that, or if you have a question that you'd like to pose to either me or my co-host, then do call in. The number is 347-857-1862. Again, 347-857-1862. We do have a chat room as well at bottom of your screen. If you're listening to us live on Blog Talk Radio, then scroll down and you'll see the chat room there at the bottom of your screen. If you're logged into your account at Blog Talk Radio, then you should be able to chat with the rest of the folks in there. And if you have a question or comment that you'd like to make that way, feel free to do it. We'll try and get it on the air for you so you don't have to listen to your own voice on the radio. It's a traumatic experience, trust me. All right, so we also have a website that I'd like you to check out. The website is at domination-submission.com, domination-submission.com. And while you're there, be sure to follow us on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, and all those other social media venues. I do have a co-host with me in my virtual studio this evening, and that is the Amazon Switchy Masochist, Little Red. How are you doing, Red?
I am doing PT King, staying nice and warm and trying my best to not be outside ever.
It's actually not too bad where we're at now. For some of our listeners, they're probably hip deep in snow, so hey, sucks to be you, right? Okay, so anyway, we're going to be talking about your local BDSM Munch Group this evening, and this is a subject that's near and dear to many of our hearts, and I'm sure that there are a lot of people out there listening who kind of want to know a lot more about this, because this is a big step for people. When people are just learning about the lifestyle and getting involved with it, one of the very first significant steps that they take into it, dipping their toe into a whole new way of life, is to join a local Munch Group. And so I think this will help some people who are listening, and even people who are already involved in Munch Groups, I think will be able to learn something about the subject tonight.
People are going to take away what they want to take away from it, which is why we do the show, but it helps to give a little bit of perspective to people who are doing this and do the new group thing and the old group thing. And I was trying to think of the politically correct way of saying stepping into the quagmire that is some aspects of going into new groups.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. I think one of the first things we probably ought to do in this show is to kind of define what a BDSM Munch Group is and what it isn't. And we probably need to make note of the fact that not all of your local fetish-related lifestyle groups are going to be BDSM groups or DS groups per se. There are going to be some groups, and a lot of the larger cities have groups that are specifically devoted to a particular fetish. So you'll have a rope play group, or you'll have an impact play group, or you'll have a group that just does age play or medical play or something like that. So you probably need to be very diligent in finding out if the group that you are looking to be a part of or to attend one of their functions, if it's the type of group that you're looking for. Because if you're just not into rope play and it's just a rope group, you're not going to get a whole lot else there. And I'm sure the people are going to be great, but if rope isn't your thing, you're probably not going to enjoy yourself very much. I think there's another thing that you want to look at, and that is paying attention to what these BDSM Munch Groups are not. And they are definitely not swingers clubs. They're not dating services. They're not brothels. And they're not hookup clubs. So do crazy things happen sometimes? Yeah, but that's not the intent. Do people meet and fall in love and get married or something? Yes, but it's not a dating service. So don't go into it thinking that that's what you're getting involved with. It's also not what most people will expect for their very first time at one of these things. I'm gonna let you finish my sentence, Red, because you are a member of a couple of the same groups that I am. When somebody comes for the very first time to one of our munches and walks up to the table and looks around and says, "Boy, you all look so
normal." There you go.
How many times have we heard that, Red? Maybe 100?
Oh, my God. Every single time we have someone new come in, you guys all look so normal. This is not what I expected. And I'm sitting there thinking, okay, what did you expect? Dog collars, leashes, and muzzles?
Yeah. And I think this is something that if we don't leave our listeners with anything to take away from this show tonight, I'd like to leave you all with this. The people who go to these munches are all just as normal as you are. They're not complete freaks or sociopaths or axe murderers or kink monsters or whatever it is you have in your mind that it's going to be. When you walk up to the group, 9 times out of 10, they're not going to be any different than if you walked up to a group of members of your local PTA or a quilting club or a book club or whatever it is. They're just average, everyday people, just like you and I. All right, maybe just like you. And they don't act any different, and you should not expect them to. So if you go into a restaurant looking for a group and you're looking for the craziest people in the place, chances are that's not going to be the Munch Group. That's going to be something else. The Munch Group usually tends to keep a low profile as much as they can, just so they don't perpetuate that negative stereotype. So I think that's important. I think it's important because a lot of people go there thinking that they're going to find something just completely off the wall, and most munch groups are just a group of people, just like you and I, having coffee or having a meal and enjoying each other's company.
I think first impressions are always, this is kind of a play party preamp, so everybody's going to be dressed for that kind of thing, and that's not the case at all. We try to keep a low-key and keep our local businesses where we meet at happy, because a lot of them don't want us there causing scenes and causing other clientele to have issues coming there. So we try to blend in, and then if you want to go home and change and then go to the play party afterwards in more appropriate fetish wear, that's groovy. But we typically, jeans, T-shirts, slacks, polos, cute little summer dresses, stuff you go out normally in public in.
Sure. And I think this is important because if you assume that everyone's going to be dressed in fetish wear or something like that, and you show up that way yourself, you may be calling unnecessary attention not only to you but to the group, which is unwanted. So be sure that you dress the way you normally would. If the munch is being held in a restaurant, a Mexican restaurant or a Denny's or something like that, just dress the way you normally would if you were going to Denny's or the restaurant or the Starbucks or wherever the munch is going to be held. There's a good reason for a munch being held in a public place, and that is to make sure that everybody is comfortable there and that people can show up for the very first time and not worry about unusual or aggressive or bad behavior. It's a public place and it's a safe place, and you don't really have to worry about that. So let's skip to the question of why would you want to find and be a part of a local BDSM munch group? Why do people want to be a part of something like that?
Well, I can't answer for everybody, but I can answer for me. I wanted to meet more people that were like me, that were interested in my fetishes, learn about their fetishes, because I don't know about all of them. And there's some fetishes out there that intrigue me and have piqued my curiosity. So-and-so might be into rope. Well, I want to learn about rope, so I'd like to learn about it, so I'd get to know them a little bit. And it gives you that opportunity to be able to meet different people from different backgrounds and different fetishes, and everybody's okay with everybody, and you start learning from each other and getting almost a family sense because you become close in that aspect because we are so small of a community.
Even in a large metropolitan area, usually when you're talking about the kink community, it's a pretty small community. And so even in large cities, you tend to see the same people at all of the events and all of the get-togethers. And you do develop a little bit of a camaraderie that is probably the primary reason for getting involved in a group like this. I can't even count the number of times that people have told me, you know, I thought I was the only one like this. I thought I was a freak. I thought that I was some kind of an abomination. Everyone else was normal, and I was freaky, kinky, or whatever. And it's a huge load off of their minds sometimes to find out that there are other people just like you. Maybe not just like you, but enough like you that you don't feel like you're a complete outcast from society or a freak or some sort of a mutant or something. You're just like everybody else. You know, I sometimes think that one of the reasons I ended up who I am and how I am today is because I learned at a very early age that everybody has a kink, has a secret sexual desire or a hidden side of their personalities that they don't show other people because it's wrapped up in not only their sexuality but in this feeling that you are different from everybody else, that you're the only one who has a foot fetish or you're the only one who enjoys pain or inflicts pain or whatever. I mean, it's just a very odd thing that so many, I honestly believe everyone has some kind of a kink, but it's odd that everyone thinks they're the only one. And being a part of a group like this is really a freeing thing. It takes this huge weight off of your shoulders and says, you know what, there's other people just like you, and you're not a freak of nature. So there's just something really cool about that. Even if you don't do anything with these folks, even if you don't even particularly like the folks in that group, it doesn't really matter. It's just kind of nice to know, wow, I'm not the only one. There's other people out there just like me. And then, of course, if you start getting to know these folks and you actually like some of them, you can actually develop a pretty interesting social life that grows out of these associations and these friendships that you make. So, as you were saying, Red, it's really kind of cool to interact and learn from each other and compare notes and just make friends of people who are a lot like you. It's a really neat thing. And you did mention
well,
also...
you and I are a perfect example of this. We met at a coffee from our local group. We threw a coffee. You and I met, and now we do weekly brunches. We talk. And
we're good friends, and it would never have happened if we hadn't met at one of these local munches. And you're not always going to come away from something like this with a new BFF or a romantic partner or any. You might not even come away with any friends. You just have to give it a shot and find out. But you can't win if you don't bet. You're never going to make any what do they say about a turtle? The turtle has to stick his head out of the shell before he can make any progress moving forward, and that's kind of like the same thing with people too. You got to stick your neck out and risk that initial sense of discomfort that you have trying something new around people that you don't know and getting to know people, letting them get to know you. It's a risky, kind of a scary thing, but there's a lot of upside to it if you work it right. Not only the camaraderie, but the friendships that you can make, the education that you can get out of it. There are lots of opportunities not only to learn from each other on a personal basis, but sometimes there are classes and demonstrations and things like that you can learn from. And there are opportunities to meet somebody who could turn out to be a potential life partner for you as well. I cautioned folks in the beginning that these munch groups are not dating services. They're not a hookup venue. But
this is not eHarmony.com.
But there are opportunities to meet people who could turn out to be someone important in your life further down the road. And as long as you're not, trying to hook up with somebody on the very first time you show up there or something like that, nobody's going to fault you later down the road if you develop some great friendships or even romantic relationships out of it. The main thing is, don't show up your first time and try to hook up with somebody and, take them home with you for the night or something. That will make you an instant pariah in the community. And people kind of like you to show up, learn by watching and listening and introducing yourself and getting to know people first before you try to pack them up in your car and take them home or anything. So probably something to think about. So I guess we have to think a little bit about what to expect out of a munch. And when we say a munch, I'm talking about a group, not necessarily just the restaurant meeting, but that's technically what we're talking about when we say the word munch. It's the meeting at a restaurant or a public place or coffee house or something like that where everybody gets together and just socializes. But these groups actually do have other things that they do. They have munches, as we just mentioned, but they also have classes and demonstrations. They have play parties, and a play party is a play party. It's not an orgy. There's almost never, and I'm saying almost never, but I'm going to say the great majority of munch groups all across the country essentially forbid sexual activities at these parties. So if you're going to a play party, a BDSM munch group play party, expecting it to be some sort of an orgy, you're going to be very disappointed. It's not at all. In fact, it's in many cases, it's not much different from the munch other than the fact that it's in a private place instead of a restaurant. And so sometimes it's just a lot of socialization, a lot of chit-chat, and a lot of getting to know one another. Sometimes there are demonstrations. There are opportunities to learn different techniques or learn different pieces of equipment, learn how to swing a flogger, how to use a piece of bondage furniture, how to operate a violet wand, or something like that. So, there's a lot of great opportunities to learn something. And, I've been doing this for decades, and I learn something every time. Even if it's something I've done 100 times, there's always another way to do it, or a better way to do it, or a smarter way to do it. So you can learn a lot from these things, and you have a great time too. I think it's a great opportunity for people to just kind of let their hair down and chit-chat and watch something interesting, maybe even participate in something, but don't go into it thinking that it's some sort of a sexual orgy or something like that, because it's not. And if you go into it with that attitude, you're going to be disinvited very quickly to most of these things anyway.
Being part of several groups and doing a couple of munches myself and things like that, we talk about everything. We can talk about, hey, I heard you got a new bit gag. How does it feel? and you give your opinion. Maybe somebody else is interested in it but doesn't quite know what is actually going to be the feel of it is, if it's metal, if it's plastic. And you can give your 2 cents, and you can find out about the latest, greatest new violent wand or the latest and greatest new paddle or flogger. And you can get people's opinions on them, but you can also talk about the latest book you read. That'll be something that you have in common with somebody else, and that'll spark up a conversation, which leads to another and another, and then you have some pretty cool friendships that come out of some random conversations.
Absolutely random. And, it doesn't have to be about kink or fetish subjects either. I mean, we, at our munches and our play parties, at any of the groups that I belong to, and you and I both belong to several groups, half the time the conversation is about something completely out there in left field, talking about their kids and their schools, and talking about their jobs, talking about their partners, talking about just the same things that everyone talks about when they get together with a bunch of their friends. And so just go into it thinking that this is just a get-together with people just like you who are interested in the same things you are, and it isn't always about kink, sex, and fetishes. Sometimes it's about how the kids are doing in school, or why it's so expensive to get your car fixed, or whatever people talk about in these kinds of situations. So I think we probably need to spend a bit of time talking about whether or not a BDSM munch group is right for you, because not everyone who thinks that it's going to be right for them is correct in that assumption. There are a lot of people, because of their misconceptions about what a group is like, or their misconceptions about themselves, may not be right for one of these groups. And I'm going to say right off the bat that if you are an antisocial kind of a person, if you are paralyzed by crippling shyness, this is probably not a good idea for you, because it is, like any social gathering, going to depend entirely on your ability to be social. So if you're going to have a situation where you're paralyzed with fear and don't want to talk to anybody, you really can't expect the rest of the group to make up for that situation, try to drag you out of your shell. It's just not fair to everybody else. So I would say if you are lacking in social skills, if you don't know how to talk to people, if you don't know how to laugh and have a good time and kind of let your hair down and relax around people and just kind of be a pal, then maybe you need to work on those skills first before you insert yourself into a situation like a BDSM munch group.
Absolutely. I mean, we've had that situation a couple of times where, me being who I am, I don't mind pulling people into the group. I don't mind talking to them, and because I'll be the one to spotlight you. If your worst fear is having everybody pay attention to you, I will make sure it happens. Because the only way you're going to get over it and be able to join in is to get over that fear, because we are going to ask questions, we are going to talk to you, we are going to be around you, and I'll spotlight you real quick, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. And everybody's always like, thank you for, helping me out and getting me to come out. And it's just, you have to be able to take that first step and say, hi, my name is Little Red, and this is who I am. And from there, you find other people who are like you, and you start to talking, and you might find somebody else who's really shy, and you guys can sit in the corner and talk quietly, and that makes you feel more comfortable. That's awesome. You're still there. You're still with the group, but you still have that little level barrier, so you're not overwhelmed. And then you start getting more confident, and everybody starts to know who you are, and you start to know who they are and recognize them, and you get to feel more comfortable, and the confidence levels in some of the people just skyrocket, because we genuinely care about the people that we're with. We want to know how your day was. We want to know how you're doing. We want to know about you.
Yeah, and again, you need to understand that it's not everyone else's job to get you over your shyness. So I know it's difficult, especially for people who are moderately shy, but just go there and just practice saying, hi, I'm Mike, what's your name? That's all you got to say, and that's what starts a conversation. And you don't even have to give your real first name. Just give your online name or make something up. I'm Billy Bob or something. It really doesn't matter. The main thing is that you're kind of consistent, that you don't have a different name every week, and that you don't make it hard for people to remember you or get to know you. Just make it easy and be friendly and introduce yourself, and that's the main thing. Don't just sit in the corner and expect people to come over and everyone has to introduce themselves to you. Get up and introduce yourselves to some other folks too. Now, what about temperament and drama? There are some problems in every group dealing with temperament and drama. And I think the key is don't be the person who is perpetuating it, and if somebody else is, don't let it get to you. It's human nature in any large group, not even large groups, anything more than 2 or 3 people, you're going to have a much more complex dynamic of interaction that lends itself to drama and to misunderstandings and that sort of thing. And so the key here is if you're one of those people who's always misunderstood, who's always in a fight with somebody, who's always mad at people, maybe this is not for you. Because nobody goes to these things to get in a fight with somebody or in an argument with somebody or have to deal with somebody's drama or insecurities or anger or whatever it is. So I would say that before you become a member of a group, take a good hard look at yourself and ask yourself, how well do you get along with others? How do you play well with others? Are you able to maintain stable, friendly relationships with people over time without them consistently and always ending up in some sort of a meltdown or flame up or something like that? So ask yourself that. And if it turns out that you're not one who plays well with others, then maybe a BDSM Munch Group is not for you. Any thoughts on that, Red?
I don't play well with others, and I still do okay, but I also tone more of me down than I would if it was just brunch at IHOP and we're flirting with a waitress and she's flaming red and needs ice.
Well, but see, that's different. I mean, it's different than getting the waitress so mad that she wants to hit you with a frying pan, see? And sometimes people are...
Oh, no, I flirt with them. I don't get them upset with me. I like my waitresses.
Sometimes people are provocative enough that you never know if a fight's going to break out or something. So those are not the kind of people you want in your group. And if you're that person, then you're probably not going to be wanted in the group either. So those are all things that you probably need to take into account before becoming a member of a local BDSM Munch Group. So we are talking tonight about Munch Groups. We're going to talk in the second half about what you can expect at some of these events, at a munch, at a class or play party, or even a dungeon, for example. We're going to talk a little bit about the protocols that should be observed, even what a protocol is. It's a word everyone uses, but nobody really understands what it means, I think. And then we will also answer some of your questions. So if you have a question or comment that you'd like to make, then by all means, give us a call. The number's 347-857-1862. Give us a call. Tell us what you think. Ask your questions. We can get you on the air, and it gives us time to take a swig of beer or something. So you're listening to Domination Submission Radio. I'm Mike Mackay, the author of Domination Submission, the BDSM Relationship Handbook, and my co-host is Little Red, an Amazon switchy masochist extraordinaire, and we will be back in about 2 minutes. we are back. This is Domination Submission Radio. My name is Mike McKay. My co-host is Little Red, and we are talking about your local BDSM Munch Group. Why would you want to be a member of one? How do you find one? What can you expect there? And what sort of protocols you should observe as a member of your local Munch Group. So we kind of skipped over the how do you find one question. We kind of went right to the why would you want to be a part of one. But let's go back and kind of revisit the how do you find one. What are your suggestions on finding a local Munch Group, Red?
Best way, honestly, the way I found several groups around my area that, I'm intrigued with and I've gone to has been through FetLife. Looking at local communities, because you can search by your town and your state, then you can search by your country, I'm assuming, if you're one of our kinky members overseas that's not here stateside. And it's actually been really beneficial because then you can take a look at the group's forum, and it helps you decide whether or not that's going to be a good fit for you, because then you can see kind of what they're into and what they're posting about, and you can get kind of a feel for the group before you join in, so that way you have a better understanding of who and what they are.
Mm-hmm. There are a lot of other ways to do it other than FetLife, and for the folks who aren't familiar with FetLife, it's FetLife.com, FetLife.com. It's kind of like Facebook for kinky people. And one of the things you've got to remember is that just like Facebook, there's just a whole lot of jerks on there. So when you do register for an account at some place like FetLife or CollarMe.com or Bondage.com or some of the other websites that cater to the online community, keep in mind that 90% of the people out there are going to be jerks, and you need to protect yourself from them, and you need to handle yourself accordingly. And you're not in any way obligated to respond to anyone. So if somebody sends you a message and asks you a question, you don't owe that person an answer, much less the right answer, or much less a personal or revealing or risky, dangerous answer. So if somebody messages you and starts asking you where you work and where you live and, are you alone at the house tonight, those kinds of things, you don't have to answer those questions, and don't do it, all right? Because most of these guys are jerks, and there are women who are jerks too. I could be the first one to attest to that. So just be careful. FetLife, I think, is probably the best way to find your local group, because, as Red said, you can search by your local community. So you can say, hey, show me everybody in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. And it'll tell you, it'll give you a list of every single member in your town. So it really works out well in that regard. But keep in mind that at least 50% of the people who are listed on the site are probably inactive and never look at their accounts, maybe haven't looked at their accounts or their messages for years. Many of them are active but just aren't interested in meeting new people. Other people are active but just don't like you. So there's a lot of reasons why not every attempt to make a friend on FetLife is going to turn out well. But just keep in mind that sometimes you have to kiss a lot of frogs to find your prince or princess. So I'm going to credit Jade for this. She keeps telling me, you may have to kiss a lot of frogs to find your prince or princesses, but the trick is not to spend all of your time with the frogs. Spend some time with the princes and the princesses. Just keep that in mind. Keep a good perspective on how these things actually work, but use FetLife to find your local group. Now, here's the other thing. You might want to make sure that you're able to separate in your mind that the online group is not going to be exactly the same as the real-life group. All right? The online group, the forum, the website, is just a way to communicate with each other. It's like the telephone or email or texting. Anyone can join those online groups. So let's say you have a group that is a group for, Cincinnati, Ohio. You can call it the Cincinnati, Ohio Kinksters group or something. Anybody can join that group. You don't have to be in Cincinnati. So you're going to have people joining the group who are in Australia or in Sweden or in Mexico or whatever. And those people are members of the online group, but when you show up for coffee, I'm going to venture to guess that they're not going to show up for coffee. So you need to be able to separate in your mind that there's an online group that lets anybody be a part of it, whether they are on the other side of the planet or whether they're an axe murderer or whether they are whoever, whatever they are, anyone can join. It's like with a click of a mouse, they are a member of the group. When it comes to your real-life, 3D, in-person group, things change a little bit because you don't want an axe murderer in that group. You really don't expect someone to fly in from Australia every other week for your coffee at Starbucks. And so there's a different dynamic there. These are different people very often. And the question of how the group is managed usually ends up having to be in the domain of the people who actually show up for the group. So just keep in mind that you have two different groups, and yes, there is overlap, a lot of overlap. But the bottom line is you have a real-life group of real-life people, and then you have an online group that may or may not be real people. In fact, there probably are a number of people in your online group who aren't real. You know, men claiming to be women, women claiming to be men, children claiming to be adults. Whatever it is, you're going to have phonies, and you're going to have posers and trolls and whatever else in the online group. It's really hard to do that in real life, but it's really easy to do that in an online forum. Sometimes confusing the two can lead to a lot of problems. Let me give you an example. Anyone can start a group on FetLife. Anyone. It really doesn't matter. It could be a 14-year-old kid, for all you know, that starts a fetish group in your local hometown on FetLife. Nobody knows. I mean, nobody goes to his house and checks his ID before he starts a group on FetLife. And so, literally, you could have a group being run by someone who's probably the least capable person in your community. But they just happen to be the first person that started a group there on FetLife. And people join, and unfortunately, people being deeply flawed individuals, sometimes, you know, the fact that you founded a group kind of goes to somebody's head, and they start believing that they can control everybody in the group, everything that they do, everything that they say or they think, and it never fails to cause problems. So, again, keep that in mind as well. Not only is the group that is online different than your group in real life, but the leaders of the online group don't necessarily have to be the leaders in your real life group. Just because somebody formed a group doesn't mean that they actually have any authority to tell anybody what to do or how to do it. So keep that in mind. It'll save you a whole lot of heartache in the future. Trust me on that one.
I'm one of the committee members for one of our local groups. It's not just ran by one person. And you can run into that to where the forum is ran by one person and that person does run that whole group just because they own the forum. And then you come into problems because it's my way or the highway thing. That's why I prefer committee groups, so that way everybody's voices are heard for how they want their munches to go and their play parties to go and how they want things to progress for their community versus my way or the highway dictates.
Now, you know, something else that I really think is worth throwing out there, and this is something that I've told a few friends and even a few members of some of the groups that you and I belong to, Red, who have gone on to other places in the country or joined other groups as they moved around the country, and that is there's nothing stopping anybody from starting their own group. And in some ways, that is an ideal situation, an ideal solution for some people who are uneasy trying to fit into somebody else's idea of how a group should run or how a group should be, or that they're having a hard time finding a group that matches their particular interests. So, for example, if you are just really, really into rope play and there's no rope group anywhere in your community, start one. One of the groups that I would suggest that you get in touch with if you're a rope enthusiast is Rope Bite International. Rope Bite International. Just look it up on the internet. They are forming groups all over the country, and they will help you form the group. And it's a great little organization. I've even considered doing that. I like rope, and I've considered forming one of those groups myself. I just don't really have the time right now. But just about anybody can do it. As long as you can gather up about half a dozen people and a place to meet, you could start one yourself. And it's a very cool thing to realize that you're not limited to somebody else's idea of what a group should be or be about even. So consider it. It really, like I said, anybody can start a group on FetLife. Just start one. Just click the Start a Group button and call it something and invite people to join, and you've got a group. The trick is to run it in a way that actually benefits the members and not just yourself. And there are people who will start groups like this just to prey on the people who join the group. So, yes, there are groups that predator types will start just so that they have a ready supply of victims. So be really careful about any group that you join. Check it out. Get recommendations. Talk to some of the individuals in the group. If you can't go to the first meeting of the group with a friend of yours, get to know someone who's already in the group and maybe meet for coffee before the meeting or something, and then they can escort you to the group and kind of introduce you around and that sort of thing. And that makes it a whole lot easier as well. It's a scary thing to just insert yourself all by yourself into a group of people that you don't know. But it's a lot easier to meet one person and then kind of ease into it that way. So now let's talk a little bit about protocols. And it's a word that we hear a lot in the lifestyle. And I'm not even sure people really understand what the word protocol means, because most people believe that it's a set of rules set in concrete that should never be violated, and that they don't vary, that they are universal worldwide. And I think this is probably one of the biggest myths ever in the lifestyle, is that protocols change from group to group, different areas of the country, different time frames. I mean, things that were considered commonplace and allowed 10 years ago might not be today. There are just a lot of things you probably need to watch out for. But for our intents and purposes tonight, protocols, we're going to interpret that to mean customs and courtesies.
I think that's a pretty good way to phrase it. I mean, other than the direct, blunt way I typically do, but that's okay.
Okay. Well, now we're going to just kind of go down a list, and we're going to kind of stick to what I've written in my book, and this is where I do my shameless plug for my book, which is Domination and Submission, the BDSM Relationship Handbook. And in the chapter on BDSM groups, there's quite a bit of material in the book about customs and protocols for a munch and for a play party. So we're just going to go down the list, and you just jump in and tell me what you think about any of these. The first one I'm going to list is, do give your first name, or at least your screen name or your username, depending on what type of a group it is, but chances are that you have an online name. But don't give people your full name.
I would agree with that until you're way more comfortable with people. And you know my last name, it doesn't bother me, but we're also really good friends, so that kind of intermingles in that. But for the beginning, yes, everybody knew me as Little Red.
Mm-hmm. And there's a good reason for this. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to fear everyone in the group, but you just never know. There might be 20, 30 people in your group, but all it takes is that one person who doesn't understand where to draw the line. And so when that person has access to personal information that would allow them to cause problems in your life, i.e. show up at your front door, show up at your workplace, become a stalker in other activities, whatever the case may be, post information about you online that shouldn't be there. When that sort of thing starts happening, it can be a really, really bad thing. And I'm speaking from experience. I'm speaking as a guy who has lost a $65,000 a year job because of that exact thing. Because I had a very comfy job, and somebody aware of personal information about me went and looked me up and started finding things and took it straight to my boss, who happened to be a very strictly religious fundamentalist Christian who opens every business meeting with a prayer. Okay, so, and you know how that went. It was basically, do you know you have somebody like this working for you? And it was just a matter of hours before I was cleaning out my desk. So it happens. It happened to me. It can happen to you. And even if you don't care about what people think about you, you have to understand that there's a reason for this protocol, and that reason is to not give other people the idea that it's okay to ask other people for their first name. So if you go up and ask, you might say, hey, it doesn't matter to me. Everyone knows what a kinkster I am, so I'm going to give you my whole name. Well, that may be all well and good for you, but that person standing next to you who's there for the first time says, oh, that's the way it's done here. So then they give out their full name. And before you know it, that person has lost their job, or they've destroyed their marriage, or they have ended up on the front page of the newspaper because he just happened to be a city councilman or something. You see what I'm saying? So even if you don't care about these things, even if you have nothing to lose, there are people around you who do. And you don't want to set a standard. You don't want to make it seem normal or acceptable to offer or ask for personal information about people that can be used against them to turn their life completely upside down. So it's very important. So just give out your first name or your username or screen name or something like that. And if people ask you for more, you just politely tell them, I don't know you well enough. Thank you very much. All right, how about number 2? Number 2 on my list of things that you should do is be yourself. Ever run into somebody who is pretending to be somebody that they aren't at one of these things, Red?
Oh, yeah. Yes, I have. We've had many a discussion about this.
Yeah. It can be pretty aggravating because, let's face it, you can't bluff your way through this lifestyle. All right? You just can't. You really can't. I don't care how much people think they can. You can't. And the more you try to do it, the more ridiculous you make yourself out to look, and you make yourself out to seem dangerous even. Or, think about this for a minute. If you're presenting yourself as an expert on some sort of technique which could actually harm somebody, imagine somebody pretending to be good at fire cupping, but they've never actually done it before. You could actually set somebody on fire and send them to the hospital with third-degree burns. All right, so
you've been doing fire cupping for a while. You can do that too.
Yes, absolutely. But again, you do not want to pretend to be anything or anyone that you're not. Just be yourself, and people will accept you for who you are. You don't have to be an expert. You don't have to be a grand poobah or anything like that. All anyone cares about is that you're a nice person and that you're interesting to talk to. So, all right, so do be pleasant, do smile, and be a good conversationalist. Now, of course, how do you become a good conversationalist? By being interested in what other people have to say. Don't be like me and just ramble on forever, babble. But be interested in what other
babble. You just have a lot to say.
You know what they say is the best way to be interesting is to be interested. People find you interesting if you're interested in them. So be interested in people. Find out, ask them about what's going on in their lives, and pay attention to what they say, and don't be dismissive or arrogant or any of those things. Be observant. Listen to people. And this is something that I can't stress enough, especially if you're going to your very first function. Just watch. You can learn an awful lot just by watching what's going on. Now, I think you had something to say about this in terms of respecting existing relationships and dynamics. What did you want to talk about on this, Red?
If you're coming in and you're single or you're poly and whatnot, you come into a new group, watch what's going on. You may not understand that so-and-so is with so-and-so because they're sitting at 2 separate tables because they're having 2 separate conversations. And respecting the boundaries between partners until you understand both people in a relationship, inserting yourself into one side of it is probably going to get you hurt real quick.
Yeah.
Because bad feelings tend to make bad blood, and that tends to taint others' opinions depending on which side of the fence they fall on.
This is probably one of the hardest things for anybody, and it doesn't matter if you've just introduced yourself to the lifestyle today or you've been doing it for 30-something years like I have. When you go into a brand new environment with all new people that you don't know, it's really hard to know who's with who belongs to who is casually related in some way to somebody else, who's watching out for somebody else. There's a lot going on under the radar, behind the scenes, that you don't know, and you won't know until you've been around a few times, much less the first time. But unfortunately, there are always going to be people who show up the very first time and assume that because you don't have a collar around your neck, or because you're not sitting on some guy's lap, or because he doesn't have his arm around you or something, that you are fair game and might start hitting on you or something like that. And before you know it, here comes angry boyfriend or angry husband or angry master or whoever. And there's drama, maybe even a broken nose or something. So you don't want to just leap into trying to establish relationships with people the first couple of times you're there. Just assume that there's a hell of a lot going on that you don't know about, a lot of relationships that you can't see that lie below the surface, and respect that. Just watch and listen and talk with people. And don't be afraid to ask, are you involved with anyone? Or, do you have a dominant? Do you have a submissive? Are you married or whatever? I mean, these are all fairly valid questions, and if somebody feels uncomfortable giving you answers to those questions, they can very easily avoid doing so. But the one thing you don't want to do is just assume that because somebody's sitting alone that they're single and they want to get hit on, because that's going to be a mistake sometimes. So,
well, it's just like the Munch we both went to not too long ago. There were some very fascinating dynamics. And me being me, I actually was quiet for quite a bit of time and just sat there and watched what was going on. And because, I like to people watch, I started picking out kind of who was with who was friends, who was good friends with who, and things like, because you can see the little plays. You need to watch for those small cues. Mm-hmm. And if you've been doing this for 30 years, 15 years, 10 years, you start picking up on these subtle cues, and you'll start to figure it out. And then I went outside and I bluntly asked the person. I said, "So what is the dynamic with you guys?" Because I was fascinated by it. Mm-hmm. It was absolutely entertaining to me. I could sit there and watch that for hours.
On the other hand, everyone who's contemplating becoming involved in this lifestyle and going to munches and meeting new people ought to practice introducing yourself, telling people a little bit about yourself. And you don't have to give a lot of personal, confidential information, but it's nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong with saying, "Hi, I'm Mike. I'm a dominant. I've done this for a couple of decades, and this is my submissive, Mary Jane," or whatever. And that helps people not have to figure it out over the course of the next 3 or 4 weeks. Now I know who this is, I know where he's coming from, and it speeds things up considerably, I think. So practice coming up with a little introduction that just tells people just the bare minimum about yourself. That will help them to interact with you in a useful way. Now, one other thing that people don't really think about is if you're going to a munch in a restaurant, order something off the menu. Nothing pisses the restaurant people off more than a bunch of people sitting around in their place without ordering any food. And eventually you'll all get kicked out. Maybe not this week or next week, but sooner or later the manager is going to come up to one of your local group leaders and say, you're not welcome back here again because, out of the 20 of you, 4 of you ordered food and the other 16 of you just sat around taking up space. So order something off the menu because that's what the restaurant is there for. Their job is not to give you a warm, fuzzy place to meet. Their job is to make money. And so if they're not making money, they're going to show you the door. So the quickest way to become unwelcome at a place is to get into the habit of going to these things and not at least ordering a drink or something off the menu. So, all right. So things not to do: don't show up drunk. Don't get drunk there. Don't ask people for personal details like where do they work and their last names and their, where do they live, those sorts of things. Don't invite yourself to any activity that you aren't invited to. Because, for example, a lot of times after a munch there'll be a play party or something like that, and you might even hear people talking about it. Don't assume that everyone is invited, particularly if this is your first time, because they don't know you. They don't know if you're an axe murderer or a cannibal. They don't know anything about you. You are a total unknown to them. So chances are they're not going to invite you. And I'll be honest with you. If you go to a munch group and it's your very first time and they do invite you to a play party, that would be a red flag to me. What about you, Red?
That would definitely give me cause for concern just because, you don't know anybody and they don't know you, and all of a sudden now you're going to a private event where you don't know the area, you don't know the space, you don't know the people, too many bad things can possibly come out of this.
Potentially a very bad thing. So, yeah, if I were showing up for my very first time and they invited me to their house for a play party, the first thing I'd be thinking is like, you don't know who I am. For all you know, I'm an axe murderer, cannibal, or something. You've just invited me into your living room, and that's a scary thought. And that tells you that they're not very careful. And if you're going to be a member of that group, you need to be a member of a group that's careful. You don't want to be a member of a group that's careless about things like that. So, red flag for me. You have to make up your own mind on that. Now, we are out of time. We haven't even gotten a chance to touch on play party protocols, which are a little different than the Munches, but we'll save that for maybe next week. In the meantime, I hope you enjoyed tonight's show, and we'll be back next week for more Domination and Submission Radio, and have a good evening.